Good morning.
Good morning.
The focus of my presentation will be on the topic of forgiveness, which I have found in the writings and the sermons and the speeches of Fathullah Gülen. If I were to sum up my presentation in one quote from Fathullah Gülen, it would be this. He said, "Forgiving consists of a return to our essence, and finding ourselves again." This quote is very much in line with what therapists, clinicians, educators, and researchers have found about the benefits of forgiveness. They say forgiveness is humanizing, it's helpful, it's restorative, and it is liberative. All of these benefits from forgiveness summed up in that one quote. The word forgiveness appears 61 times in one of Fathullah Gülen's books that was published in 2006. And he has one chapter devoted to the topic of forgiveness. It's something I have not seen in writings and books of other Muslim scholars. Not that they do not mention it, they do, but usually it's scriptural verses, hadiths, imploring the Muslims, the reader, to forgive, but really do not offer an integrated or a systematic approach to forgiveness. You probably know that Fathullah Gülen in 2008 in a magazine, Foreign Policy and Prospect, rated him among the top 20 public intellectuals in the world. I believe the features of love and peace, tolerance, and compassion, which are prerequisites as well as outcomes of forgiveness, in my opinion, place him in the top list of what Father Michel said in the foreword to that book, agent and witness to God's universal mercy. I think it places him on the top, agents and witnesses to God's universal mercy. So what is Fathullah Gülen's perspective on forgiveness? And I'm going to share with you not only what he thinks about forgiveness, but also how he has demonstrated it in action, his acts of forgiveness. But before I go into that, I think it would be helpful to provide some background about the idea of forgiveness itself. For a long time, it has been the lot of philosophers and theologians, and in the last 3 to 4 decades, the idea of forgiveness, the concept of forgiveness, has captured the interest of social scientists. In the early 80s, and specifically at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, under the direction of Professor Enright, who still is very active in writing and researching the topic of forgiveness. He was the first. He is considered to be the father or the Columbus of forgiveness research. He started the empirical study, and I was fortunate to be one of his first students. When we first started, we had probably a dozen articles that I could locate in philosophy and theology journals. And then as the years went by, we could find more and more. And the first empirical piece appeared in '87. And forgiveness was situated in the realm of moral education. And that's how my interest started on the topic as an educator. 1990, when I graduated, there were so many dissertations and so many books, so many articles about forgiveness. No longer would I go to a conference, and when I announced that my topic is forgiveness, people would look at me as a son of a minister or a pastor. It has been thrusted on the scientific seen, and it's been very acceptable. But it was very tough breaking into the journals and also the professional conferences. Forgiveness. We worked on definitions, we worked on the process of forgiveness at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and then other universities like the University of Virginia. There also has been a movement and lots of writings and research about forgiveness. And it's become a worldwide fascination of researchers in social science. Forgiveness is defined as follows, because we all bring our own conception to it. What it is an inner release, and it is concerned primarily with psychological healing, with spiritual healing. And it usually follows an injury. And that injury must meet 3 criteria. The injury or the hurt or the wound needs to be personal. So forgiveness occurs between people, it's interpersonal. You cannot forgive a tornado, although it does a lot of damage to us. You cannot forgive a system or institution, although it may be unjust and cruel. Also, besides personal, it is unfair. That injury is unfair. It was not deserved, it was not necessary. And the third feature of the wound or the hurt or the injury that it brings about or calls for forgiveness is depth. That wound is deep or profound. It's not a trifle. Somebody betrays your deepest secret when you entrust it. That would call in and would create a crisis of forgiveness. Although, at least the early writings of forgiveness thought that the definition is clear enough. But as we presented in conferences and wrote papers, there has always been confusion about, is forgiveness the same as forgetting? Is it the same as reconciliation? Is it the same as condoning? Is it the same as legal pardon? So there are many other concepts that are conflated with forgiveness, and they are not really forgiveness. The most widely confusion, the most, I would say, pervasive confusion is forgiveness is reconciliation. And I'd like to say that is not true. Forgiveness paves the way for reconciliation. If I have been estranged from a friend or a relative or an individual, I may forgive that person, but I may not join that individual as a friend because maybe he or she is dead, nowhere to be around, or that person remains unchanged, still very hurtful, okay? So I can forgive that individual without actually reconciling. But forgiveness paves the way for reconciling with that person. A lot of people conflate forgiveness with legal pardon, that forgiveness, if we give a lot of attention to it, perhaps it would let prisoners off easily. And that is legal pardon when there is public release of prisoners. Justice and forgiveness can exist hand in hand, and you probably know when the Pope forgave the Turkish assassin, went to the prison and forgave him. Justice was served, and forgiveness also happened. I think that background is very crucial and key to understanding Fethullah Gülen's ideas of forgiveness. Fethullah Gülen situates his perspective in the larger context of mercy. So to him, forgiveness is a supererogatory act or a merciful act. I want to mention a few features of his perspective and also conclude with some actions, some acts of forgiveness from Gülen's life. The first, Fathullah Gülen's perspective is deeply rooted in his Islamic faith. As Father Michel said, that Prophet Muhammad is an example to him. And that is the example that he cites in all the references to forgiveness. He cites two verses from the Holy Quran, which really are key to understanding his perspective of forgiveness. And that is chapter 16, verse 126. And if you have to respond to any wrong, respond to the extent of the wrong done to you. But if you endure patiently, this is indeed better for he who endures. So patient endurance is one feature of Fathullah Gülen's perspective and forgiveness, is when pain and injury occurs to us, we do not act in a revengeful manner. We endure it patiently. It doesn't mean we bury it and we let it swell and fester, but rather work with it very actively. It's active working through the pain and the injury that occurred. So that is key. Another feature of Fathullah Gülen's perspective on forgiveness relates to the idea of tolerance, which sometimes I have difficulty distinguishing it from forgiveness itself. So almost is used interchangeably or synonymously to forgiveness. In one of Gülen's speeches, Gülen refers to Prophet Muhammad, his example of tolerance and forgiveness, especially with the people of Mecca on the day of the conquest of Mecca. The people of Mecca who were hostile, who expelled the Prophet from his homeland and were very violent toward him and toward his followers. On that day, they thought it will be genocide. Prophet Muhammad and his people are gonna really kill and obliterate the Meccans. So the Meccans asked him, they were wondering what he's gonna do to them. He said, what I'll do is, what I say to you today is what Joseph said to his brother. There is no reproach for you, and I'll ask God to forgive you. Go, you are free. He, in the face of hatred, in the face of hostility, he faced it with forgiveness. It would have been very easy for the victorious army to vanquish the enemy and obliterate. Another example of the kindness and forbearance that Fathullah Gülen cites in his writings is a fellow named Abdullah ibn Ubay, who was an enemy throughout his life of the Prophet. When he passed away and the Prophet heard about it, he offered his shirt as a burial shroud. And he also said, as long as there is no revelation forbidding me from attending the funeral, I will go and attend the funeral. And that's a lesson to his followers and to all of us. Patient endurance, tolerance, also the idea of compassion, which in Fathullah Gülen's, when he describes it, it is really the engine, it's the instrument that engenders the willingness as well as the will to forgive. And again, he refers to the Prophet as an example for compassion. On the Battle of Uhud, when the Prophet was severely injured, he turned to God and he said, "O God, forgive my people, for they do not know." In the face of ignorance, again, there is kindness, forbearance, and forgiveness. With compassion, Gülen subscribes to unconditional love. And again, I use a quote that was cited in today's Zaman in October the 14th of this year. He was talking about unconditional love. He said, when you show love to people, you should not expect a favor in return. There would be no end to it. You must love people unconditionally. And why forgiveness? Gülen said that we believe that forgiveness and tolerance will heal most of our wounds, if only this celestial instrument will be in the hands of those who understand its language. And this is what I mean about Gülen's is very systematic about the topic of forgiveness. He offers and he talks about things that need to be done to translate it into action so that we can use it in our daily lives and in our transgressions against others or against us. I'm looking at the 5-minute note, and I'm selecting and choosing where I would go next. Forgiveness in action. There was an interview with Naval Savandi. I think it was published in 1997. And she asked Fathullah Gülen this question: you've suffered a lot in your life. How did you overcome events that could have smothered your enthusiasm and smashed you? It would have smashed you. His response, which is very pithy, very brief, but to me, studying the process of forgiveness, his response is the process of forgiveness that took a team in Madison 3 years to come up with. He said, once I was followed for 6 years as if I were a traitor. It bothered me, but I forgot it. I didn't feel hostility toward anyone. Even then, I approached the matter logically, not emotionally. I've forgiven the people who did this. If one day I see the faith of the people secured and a peaceful atmosphere surrounding the world, then everything will have been worthwhile. To me, the first part when he said, it bothered me as a human being when something unfair, deep, interpersonal happens, it touches our emotions. Okay? It bothers us. It makes us angry. We may become resentful. Okay? For some, it could reach to rage. So a host of negative emotions will be triggered. So it bothered him. But then he said, I forgot it. I would have dismissed this as you're just using repression. But he said, I do not feel any hostility toward anyone. So the first part is the uncovering phase in the language of forgiveness. You deal with the pain, you're aware of it, and then you decide what to do with it. The cessation of negative emotions is a good indication that forgiveness is occurring or has occurred. He said, I do not feel hostility toward anyone, and I've forgiven those people. The motivation to forgive, because he wants to see people faith in their secure and peace in the world. And in the types of forgiveness, that is the highest type. It's the principled where you think of the other person who injured you as a member of the human family. You do not look at that individual in an inferior way. There are other examples. In my last 2 minutes, I would like to focus on another theme where Fathullah Gülen, I see this as why he gives emphasis and attention to forgiveness, because of the centrality of the individual in the movement, the centrality of the individual. He has a profound belief in the transformative power of the individual on society. I quote about what he feels about the individual. He said, everything of beauty and every value present in individuals is multiplied and reflected in society. In contrast, everything that is inappropriate, every insufficiency is a scandal, and as a scandal blocks society's path and inflicts deep wounds upon it. The use of forgiveness language brings about harmony of heart and mind to the individual and to society. I believe heeding the perspective, the thoughts, as well as the actions of Fathullah Gülen will inspire many people to join that movement to become agents and witnesses to God's universal mercy. Thank you very much.